Officer Derek Mitchell holds the card with both hands. One thumb presses against the laminate, testing it the way a man tests a stick before deciding to break it. Elijah Reynolds sits behind the wheel of his Honda. His hands rest where Mitchell told him to keep them. Engine off, window down. Hot July air pushes into the car in slow waves. "That's federal property," Elijah says, his voice even. "You can verify it right now through Fort Cavazos military police. Don't bend it." Mitchell looks at him, not at the card, and bends it anyway. The plastic gives with a short, flat crack. The embedded chip splits along its seam. Two halves drop onto the passenger seat, landing beside a tactical duffel bag that has not been unpacked since a transport plane touched down 9 hours earlier. "Fake ID," Mitchell says. "Step out of the vehicle." He believes, in this moment, that he has caught something. A pretender, a man playing soldier in a 10-year-old car. What he has actually done is destroy the Department of Defense identification of Captain Elijah Reynolds, a United States Army logistics officer 4 hours removed from the end of a 14-month deployment. Breaking the card is not what ends Derek Mitchell's career. That happens later, after investigators start pulling apart exactly how many other cards like it he has broken or kept over the years. 20 minutes earlier, none of this has happened yet. Highway 195 runs flat and straight toward Fort Cavazos, heat shimmering above the asphalt in long, wavering sheets. Dry grass lines the shoulder, brown from weeks without rain. Dust drifts off the gravel edge every time a truck passes. In the distance, the low outline of the base's water towers and hangars sits against a white summer sky. Cicadas saw away in the ditches. Heavy trucks rumble past in the opposite lane, headed for the gate, their air brakes hissing as they slow for the checkpoint ahead. Elijah has been driving for 2 hours, and his body still hasn't caught up to the time zone he left behind. He's wearing a faded college hoodie, gone soft at the seams, loose sweatpants, and sneakers with the tread worn down on the outside edge. The Honda Accord is the same car he bought before his commission, the odometer well past what most dealerships would call reasonable. On the passenger seat sits a tactical duffel, packed with the practiced efficiency of a man who has done this before. For 14 months, Elijah's days ran on a rhythm built around supply manifests, convoy schedules, and equipment readiness reports, the unglamorous machinery that keeps an operation fed, fueled, and moving. He is good at his job in the way that goes unnoticed when everything works and becomes obvious the moment it doesn't. He holds a clearance appropriate to that work, the kind that comes with responsibility rather than mystery. He has never once needed to explain what he does to justify who he is. None of that is visible from outside the car. From outside the car, he is a tired man in a hoodie behind the wheel of an old Honda, windows down because the air conditioning gave out somewhere around the Texas border, and he hasn't had a free hour to fix it. He's due at the reintegration center in under an hour. Identification verification, a medical screening, a logistics debrief, and then finally leave. A shower, sleep in a bed that doesn't move, his daughter's voice in the next room, instead of over a satellite line, asking him the same question she's asked every video call for the last 2 months. When are you actually coming home? Not just talking about it. That's the version of the afternoon he's driving toward when the lights appear in his mirror. Elijah checks his speedometer out of pure habit. 53 in a 55 zone. Then checks his lane position, his registration sticker, his blinker. He's not worried. He hasn't done anything. He signals, eases onto the shoulder, shifts into park, kills the engine, and rolls the window down before the cruiser has even fully stopped behind him. Both hands go to the wheel, fingers spread. Derek Mitchell approaches from the blind spot on the driver's side, one hand resting near his holster out of habit, more than necessity. "You know why I stopped you?" "No, sir, I don't." "Cross the center line about 2 miles back." "I don't believe that's accurate, officer. I've held my lane the whole way. It's not defiance. It's a simple, factual correction." Delivered the way Elijah corrects a subordinate's map reading, without heat, without doubt. But something about the tone lands wrong with Mitchell, the same way it's landed wrong on other stretches of this same highway, with other drivers, More times than anyone at the department has bothered to count. License, registration, insurance. Registration's in the glove box. Insurance card's with it. License is in my wallet in my back pocket. I'm going to reach for the glove box now. He narrates each movement before making it, a habit built from years of handling weapons and equipment around people who need to know exactly what your hands are about to do. Mitchell takes the license, studies it, flips it over, studies it again. Address, says Austin. What are you doing all the way out here? I'm stationed near here. I'm coming back from deployment. Mitchell looks him over. The hoodie gone soft with washing, the tired eyes, the car with 140,000 miles on it, the duffel bag riding in the passenger seat like ordinary luggage. You're gonna tell me you're military. I'm an Army captain. Mitchell laughs, short and genuine. Sure you are. What do you actually do? Work the chow hall? Motor pool? I'm a captain in the United States Army, Elijah says again. No faster, no louder. Logistics officer. Stolen valor's a real problem out here, Mitchell says. Guys like you showing up in beat-up cars, playing dress-up for sympathy discounts. You got anything that actually proves that? I understand your concern, officer. I can show you my common access card, and it can be verified through Fort Cavazos in under a minute if you want to be sure. I didn't ask for a lecture on how to do my job. I'm not lecturing you. I'm telling you the fastest way to confirm what I'm telling you is true. Mitchell glances past him into the back seat, then at the duffel bag riding beside him on the passenger side. What's in the bag? Personal gear. Uniform, boots, a laptop bag. You're welcome to look, though I'd ask you to be careful with the laptop. Convenient you'd let me look at everything except that ID. I haven't refused to show you anything, officer. I'm asking you to verify it properly instead of guessing. I do. It's in my wallet. I'm reaching for it now. He draws his wallet slowly, opens it, and hands over a common access card, the kind carried by every service member in the country, embossed with his photograph, his name, his branch of service, a small embedded chip catching the sunlight along one edge. Mitchell holds it up, turns it in the light. For a half second, something in his face shifts, an almost recognition, the look of a man who knows exactly what a real one looks like and is seeing it now. Then the look closes back over. Font looks off, he says. Chip looks off too. It's genuine, officer. If you have any doubt, you can call Fort Cavazos Military Police right now, or the Visitor Control Center, and they'll verify it in under a minute. You could also request your supervisor. I'll wait however long that takes. That's federal property. Elijah adds, because it matters, because the words have weight, even if Mitchell doesn't want to hear them. Please don't bend it. Mitchell holds the card between his fingers a moment longer, weighing something that has nothing to do with plastic or a chip. I'll decide what's real and what's not. The crack is small and final. The two halves fall onto the passenger seat. Fake ID, he says. Step out of the vehicle. You're under arrest for possessing forged federal identification, false statements to an officer, and suspected attempt to gain unauthorized access to a military installation. None of those charges had anything behind them yet. Elijah was still parked on the shoulder, nowhere near a gate, with no forged document in evidence, only a broken one. Mitchell was naming crimes first and hoping the facts would catch up to him later. Elijah steps out slowly, hands still visible, and doesn't resist as Mitchell walks him back to the shoulder. The asphalt radiates heat through the soles of his sneakers. Somewhere behind him, a truck slows as it passes, the driver's face turning toward the flashing lights for a second, before continuing on toward the gate. One more stranger who will never know what he almost witnessed. Mitchell pats him down, finds nothing, and leans him against the hood of the cruiser instead of the Honda. Elijah doesn't argue about the charges being read to him, doesn't ask Mitchell to reconsider, doesn't raise his voice even once. He isn't thinking about the paperwork Mitchell is filling out with quick, satisfied strokes of his pen. He's thinking about a reintegration checkpoint he is now going to miss, and about a liaison officer who is, at this exact moment, starting to notice. Elijah's travel coordinator had logged his route that morning. Part of a standard accountability check, required for personnel returning, with unit equipment still in their possession. The duffel bag among it. His liaison officer had a call-in window, and when it closes without an answer, a second call goes unanswered too. By the time 35 minutes have passed with no word and no vehicle at the gate, a security liaison team already stationed near the reintegration center, in the middle of processing the rest of Elijah's returning convoy, is sent down Highway 195 to find him. Colonel Caldwell happens to be in a separate vehicle nearby, finishing a site visit, and redirects when the liaison team calls in a location. Their two vehicles reach the shoulder within a few minutes of each other. A colonel's staff car, followed shortly by a second vehicle carrying an Army Criminal Investigation Division agent and a senior non-commissioned officer. Mitchell straightens instinctively at the sight of it, then catches himself and steps toward it instead, one hand raised. "This is an active investigation. I need you to stay back." The CID agent, stepping out first, doesn't raise his voice. "Keep your hand away from your weapon, officer." Colonel Raymond Caldwell steps out next, moving directly toward the Honda without acknowledging Mitchell at all. He is Elijah's senior logistics commander, the man who has read his after-action reports for 14 months and signed off on his return. He sees Elijah standing at the rear of his own car, hands still at his sides, and the broken card sitting in plain view on the passenger seat through the open door. "Captain Reynolds," Caldwell says, "we expected you at the reintegration center 40 minutes ago." He extends a hand and then, briefly, something closer to a salute, a small gesture, but one that lands on the highway shoulder with more weight than anything Mitchell has said in the last 20 minutes. Mitchell watches a full colonel address the man he called a fraud by rank and name. Without hesitation, without needing to ask a single question first. "Are you injured, Captain?" "No, sir. No physical contact beyond the stop itself." Officer Mitchell refused to verify my identification through any available channel and destroyed it intentionally after I asked him not to. Caldwell doesn't raise his voice either. He doesn't need to. "Secure that card," he tells the CID agent. "Photograph it in place before you move it." He turns to Mitchell now for the first time. "Did you attempt to verify Captain Reynolds' identification through Fort Cavazos Military Police, the Visitor Control Center, or any Department of Defense channel before destroying it?" "He didn't look like an officer," Mitchell says. "That's not an answer to my question. He was in a hoodie, driving a beat-up car. That's not how officers present themselves. Off-duty soldiers don't drive home in uniform. His rank didn't change because he wore a hoodie. You had a phone. You chose not to use it." "I've stopped plenty of guys out here claiming to be soldiers," Mitchell says, a note of defensiveness creeping into his voice now. "Most of them weren't." "Then a phone call should have handled it," Caldwell says. "Instead, you broke the one thing he handed you before you ever made that call." Mitchell doesn't have an answer for that. He looks past Caldwell toward the CID agent photographing the broken card, and for the first time since the stop began, something like doubt moves across his face. Caldwell doesn't press further. He doesn't need to. He's already reaching for his own phone to call the local police chief. Chief Robert Barnes arrives 18 minutes later, stepping out of his cruiser into heat that's climbed another 5 degrees since the stop began. Barnes has worked alongside Fort Cavazos for over a decade, coordinating joint patrols, attending base liaison meetings, shaking the hands of officers he respects. He is not part of whatever has happened here. But he is about to learn how much of it he could have caught earlier, if he'd looked harder the first few times. He examines the broken card. He checks the dash camera footage, still running, still recording the empty shoulder in front of the cruiser. He checks the dispatch log for any reported lane violation. There isn't one. No call, no note. Nothing but Mitchell's own initiation of the stop. "Did you contact military police at any point?" Barnes asks. "No," Mitchell says. "Why not?" "He didn't look like an officer to me," Mitchell says. Barnes doesn't say anything for a moment, standing in the heat with the broken card in an evidence bag in his hand, doing the math on how many times he's heard some version of that sentence from Mitchell before and how many times he let it go, because the report on top always sounded reasonable enough on its own. He looks over at the Honda, at the duffel bag still sitting on the passenger seat, at Colonel Caldwell standing a short distance away with the quiet patience of a man who has already decided how this is going to end regardless of what Barnes says next. Anyone else out here see the stop happen? Barnes asks, mostly to himself, already knowing the dash camera answers that question better than any witness could. Hand over your weapon, badge, and radio, he says finally. You're on administrative suspension, effective now. A second patrol unit arrives to transport Mitchell from the scene. Barnes doesn't lecture him on the shoulder of the highway, doesn't perform outrage for anyone watching. He simply does his job, several years later than he should have. Caldwell's team takes Elijah to the base. Because his card no longer exists in any usable form, gate personnel verify him through an alternate identity procedure. Fingerprint confirmation cross-checked against his personnel file. A phone call to his unit. A temporary credential printed and laminated on the spot. When the temporary credential comes off the printer, still warm, his hand isn't quite steady taking it. It isn't the arrest that catches up with him in that moment. It's the thought that a piece of plastic could decide, for a stranger with a badge, whether the last 14 months had happened the way he says they did. He receives a brief medical evaluation, mostly routine, the kind every returning soldier goes through. His formal debrief is rescheduled to the following morning. He's given a few minutes to change out of the hoodie and into his Army service uniform, and the base photographer, documenting his return for the unit's files, catches the two versions of him standing almost side by side. The tired man in worn civilian clothes from an hour earlier, and the captain in uniform now signing paperwork at a folding table under fluorescent light. Same face. Same voice. Nothing about him had changed except what he was wearing. Colonel Caldwell stops by the processing room once the paperwork is mostly finished. He doesn't ask about the highway again. He asks about the deployment instead. The supply lines Elijah managed. A delayed shipment that had caused problems for 2 weeks in the spring, whether the replacement parts ever arrived on schedule. It's an ordinary conversation between two officers who respect each other's work, and Elijah understands it for what it is, a small, deliberate return to normalcy offered without being announced as one. "Get some sleep, Captain," Caldwell says on his way out. The debrief can wait until morning. Elijah gives a sworn statement to Army CID and a judge advocate officer later that afternoon. Walking through the stop from the moment the lights appeared in his mirror to the moment the card came apart in Mitchell's hands. He answers each question directly, without embellishment, the same way he'd fill out an incident report on deployment. Facts in order, nothing added for effect. Investigators pull the dash camera footage from Mitchell's cruiser, and it matches his account almost word for word. Elijah driving steadily in his lane, hands visible at every step, offering verification 3 separate times, and Mitchell ignoring each offer before breaking the card in full view of the camera he apparently forgot was running. The judge advocate officer asks him, near the end of the interview, whether he wants to pursue a personal claim against the department for what happened on the highway. "That's not really what I'm here for," Elijah says. "I want the card replaced, and I want to know if this was really a one-time thing. If it wasn't, that matters more to me than anything that happens to me personally." Before the interview ends, Elijah makes one request. Don't treat this like it's just about me. If he's done this to me, on a normal Tuesday, on a road he drives every week, I'd want you to look at whether I'm the first. He isn't. The investigation that follows spans several agencies working in parallel. Army CD, the FBI's civil rights investigators, the local department's internal affairs, and eventually a federal prosecutor's office coordinating with Department of Defense legal counsel. Investigators pull Mitchell's stop history, his citation records, his search logs, his evidence room entries, and a stack of prior complaints that had each, individually, been closed as inconclusive. 2 of the reopened prior complaints mention the same detail in passing. The driver never got their identification back, and Mitchell's paperwork simply noted it as retained. Neither complaint had been flagged before, but together with the fresh evidence from Elijah's stop, they give a federal magistrate enough to sign a search warrant for Mitchell's home. The search turns up a small wooden box in the back of a garage cabinet, tucked behind a shelf of unused tools. Inside it, investigators find 14 identification cards, driver's licenses, military common access cards, retired military IDs, veterans identification. Most belong to Black, Hispanic, or Asian service members and veterans. None of them were ever logged into evidence, and none match any case where a document was reported lost or destroyed through official channels. Kept together, unlogged, hidden behind a shelf rather than filed anywhere an evidence audit would find them. They read less like misplaced paperwork and more like something set aside on purpose. The agent who finds the box photographs each card individually before bagging it, laying them out on a folding table in Mitchell's own garage in the order they were found. 14 names that had, until that afternoon, existed only in 14 separate, unconnected complaint files. Cross-referencing them against the department's own records takes less than a day. What took years to accumulate takes an afternoon to expose. Once someone finally has a reason to look in the right box. Sergeant First Class Andre Lewis is one of them. Mitchell had taken his card after a weekend drill, claiming his photo looked suspicious, leaving Andre to quietly replace it, rather than risk drawing attention before a promotion board he badly wanted to clear. When investigators call, he's quiet for a moment before saying he still remembers the exact stretch of road and that he'd avoided driving it since. Specialist Miguel Santos is another. Mitchell had accused him of impersonating a service member 2 years earlier, had his car towed on the spot, and left him several $100s poorer with a complaint that went nowhere for lack of camera footage. He tells investigators he'd assumed it was simply his word against a badge. Retired Sergeant Angela Brooks recognizes the story the moment it hits the news. Mitchell had taken her retired military identification years before, calling it expired when it wasn't, and the delay cost her a missed appointment at a military medical facility. She calls investigators herself. She still has the letter that came back calling her original complaint resolved, though nothing about it had ever felt resolved to her. Chief Barnes sits through each of these interviews personally. He doesn't try to distance the department from what they reveal. An outside review, ordered by the city alongside the federal case, finds that Barnes had personally signed off on 3 of Mitchell's earlier complaint closures without ever cross-checking them against one another. He isn't charged with anything. There's no evidence he knew about the box, or intended for the pattern to continue. But he's placed under a corrective action agreement that strips him of authority to close future misconduct complaints on his own, with an outside monitor reviewing every one for the next 2 years. He tells a reporter afterward, plainly, that the department should have found this pattern years earlier, and that the failure to do so wasn't only Mitchell's. Mitchell's attorney initially frames the highway stop as a high-stress misjudgment involving suspected stolen valor, the kind of mistake, he argues, that any officer might make under pressure near a military base. The dash camera footage makes that framing difficult to sustain. The box of 14 cards makes it impossible. Federal prosecutors bring charges tied to the common access card itself, willful destruction of federal property and deprivation of rights under color of law, while the driver's licenses and other state-issued documents in the box support separate unlawful seizure and civil rights counts running alongside the federal case. When his attorney lays out what a trial would actually look like, 5 or 6 former victims testifying in sequence, video evidence for at least 2 of the stops, the box itself sitting on an evidence table in front of a jury, Mitchell accepts a plea agreement rather than contest it. Sentencing takes place a little over 7 months later, in a federal courtroom with wood paneling and too much air conditioning. Elijah attends in his Army service uniform, captain's bars steady on his shoulders. The promotion review that had already been underway before any of this happened now quietly completed in the months since. The prosecutor places the box of 14 cards on the evidence table. each one bagged and labeled. A small, plain object that says more than any statistic could about how long this had gone on. Andre Lewis speaks. Miguel Santos speaks. Angela Brooks speaks. Her voice steady, even as she describes the missed appointment that took months to reschedule. Elijah speaks last, and briefly. I'm not asking the court to punish him because he failed to recognize my rank, he says. I'm asking the court to make sure he never again gets to use a badge to decide whose identity deserves to be believed. Mitchell's attorney, in his closing argument, asks the court to view the highway stop as a single lapse in judgment by an otherwise capable officer under the pressure of a job that requires split-second decisions. The prosecutor's response is short. She reminds the court that a split-second decision doesn't explain a wooden box with 14 cards inside it, collected patiently over years, never once logged, never once returned. The judge notes, before passing sentence, that Mitchell had been offered verification at every point along the way. A phone call, a supervisor, a 15-minute wait, and chose destruction instead, more than once, over the course of years. With multiple victims and a pattern spanning several years factored into the guideline range, she sentences him to 11 years in federal prison. The conviction itself makes him permanently ineligible for law enforcement certification under state law, a determination the State Licensing Commission finalizes within the month. Where restitution is available, the victims receive it, though no dollar figure returns a missed medical appointment or a promotion board cleared under quiet stress instead of confidence. The department Mitchell worked for adopts a set of reforms in the months that follow. Any suspected federal identification now requires supervisor notification before it can be confiscated at all, and destruction outside a formal evidence procedure is expressly prohibited. Seized documents are logged electronically at the moment they're taken. Body cameras upload automatically, outside the department's own control. An early warning system flags officers with repeated profiling complaints for outside review rather than routine, individual closure, so that 14 separate incidents can no longer sit 14 separate times in 14 separate files without anyone noticing the shape they make together. The department begins joint training sessions with Fort Cavazos Military Police, focused specifically on identification protocols for off-duty and returning service members. A full audit of Mitchell's prior stops leads to the dismissal of citations that never should have been issued, along with refunds for towing fees that were never justified in the first place, including Andre Lewis's. None of it undoes what Andre lost, or Miguel, or Angela, or the version of Elijah's homecoming that should have been nothing more than a quiet drive and a shower and his daughter's voice down the hall. But it makes the next stop on that highway a little less likely to end the same way. About a year later, Elijah drives the same gray Honda Accord down Highway 195, wearing ordinary clothes again, no uniform, no urgency, just a Saturday errand. A patrol cruiser appears in his mirror for a moment, then passes him without slowing, without lights, without a second look. He reaches the gate at Fort Cavazos and hands over his newly issued common access card. The military police officer scans it, checks the record, and waves him through with the same brief nod given to everyone else in line that morning. No delay, no second glance, no question about what he does or doesn't look like behind the wheel of an old car. His daughter is waiting on the front steps when he pulls into the driveway. And for the first time in over a year, there's nothing standing between the two of them and an ordinary Saturday. Derek Mitchell didn't lose his career because he failed to recognize an Army captain on a hot afternoon. He lost it because he was given the truth, offered freely and repeatedly, and chose to destroy it instead. Not once, but as a habit, over years, against people who had almost no way to be believed until one card happened to break in front of the right witnesses. The colonel's salute made for a good moment on the side of a highway. It wasn't the point. The point was that Andre Lewis and Miguel Santos and Angela Brooks, each stopped on ordinary days for no real reason at all, were finally heard. So here's a question worth sitting with. Should an officer be pulled from street duty immediately after intentionally destroying someone's identification? And should the supervisors who let complaints like these go uninvestigated for years answer for that too? Leave your thoughts below.